This is the Capitol Rundown.
We have made a tremendous amount of progress working together to build a stronger Michigan.
I didn't have to move anywhere to run in this district. My opponent, on the other hand, hasn't lived here more than a few months.
Since August the 2nd, it appears that Tudor Dixon has done very little to move the numbers off of her base of 39% to a higher number.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Thompson. It's been back-to-back big weekends for Michigan politics. The Michigan Republican Party is meeting this weekend for its nominating convention. We'll talk about the fireworks expected there in a few minutes. But first, the Democrats met for their convention last weekend. And as you may expect, there were not a lot of surprises. That's because Michigan Democrats have 4 incumbents ready to go for the top statewide offices. Governor Gretchen Whitmer and her running mate, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, will top the ticket. Whitmer talked about the challenges of the last 4 years and how she's looking forward to the next 4.
And over the last few months, I've been often asked, why on earth do I want to keep doing this work? And for me, the answer is simple. Tough times call for tough leadership. And despite all of the challenges that we have faced, we have made a tremendous amount of progress working together to build a stronger Michigan.
While Whitmer won an uncontested primary, Democrats had to choose candidates for Attorney General and Secretary of State. And again, no surprise here, incumbent Attorney General Dana Nessel got the nod for another shot at serving as the state's top lawyer. And Democrats also chose incumbent Jocelyn Benson to represent them again for Secretary of State. Benson says whether it's at a branch office or the ballot box, her department has made great strides during her time in office.
We looked ahead to what we hoped would be a new day for democracy in Michigan, a day in which our government and our democracy would work better for everyone. And we made that happen.
But those aren't the only statewide offices. Democrats also chose candidates for the Michigan Board of Education and the boards at U of M, MSU, and Wayne State University. They also chose a familiar face for the Michigan Supreme Court. Justice Richard Bernstein will be one of their nominees. He was first elected in 2014 and is running now for his second term. And for the second seat, they chose Kira Harris Bolden. She's an attorney who's currently a state representative as well. Well, this weekend, though, the shoe is on the other foot. Republicans are gathered in Lansing to nominate candidates of their own. But tension within the party means there could be some fireworks. There's been some buzz about trying to replace the Republican candidate for Attorney General. That's because a special prosecutor could soon be looking into whether Matt DePerno broke the law by investigating the 2020 election. He and others are accused with tampering with election machines as part of their own personal probe. And then there's a challenge we know will happen. It's by a failed candidate for governor who's trying to oust Tudor Dixon's hand-picked candidate for lieutenant governor. Last week, Dixon picked former state representative Shane Hernandez to join her on the ticket. While candidates traditionally pick their running mates without much pushback, delegates at the party convention still need to ratify the pick. This year, though, Ralph Rebant, who finished in last place in the GOP gubernatorial primary, says he wants to challenge Hernandez and take over that number 2 spot.
Even if there were other candidates to throw their name in on Saturday, I think if she in her heart had to pick somebody, I really honestly think she would pick me because I know she knows that we get along.
Just 90 minutes, though, after Rebant announced he was running, former President Donald Trump came to Dixon's rescue. He said he talked to Dixon about her choice of running mate and that he, quote, checked and found him to be an outstanding person. He went on to say, this is who Tudor wants, and therefore Shane is who I want as your next lieutenant governor. Rebant says Trump's endorsement won't change his strategy and that he still supports the former president. Well, stay tuned. We'll tell you how this all plays out. And up next, we have some poll numbers that show us the state of the race and some other surprising findings. Stick around, the Capitol Rundown. We'll be right back. Welcome back. With less than a month before voting starts and just more than 2 months before Election Day, we have our first snapshot of how the statewide races are looking. A new poll shows Governor Gretchen Whitmer with a double-digit lead over Tudor Dixon. The incumbent Democrat has the support of half of the people surveyed, while the Republican has just under 40%. The other 11% couldn't or wouldn't give their opinion. But the races for Attorney General and Secretary of State are much closer. That same poll shows Attorney General and incumbent Democrat Dana Nessel with 43% support, while Republican Matt DePerno has 39%. That's within the poll's 4-point margin of error. 18% are undecided or wouldn't say. Now, the incumbent in the race for Secretary of State is faring slightly better. Democrat Jocelyn Benson has 44% to Republican Christina Karamo's 38%. And again, another 18% haven't made up their minds or wouldn't share their thoughts. The poll also has some interesting findings beyond the candidates. Check this out. When Michigan voters were asked what's important to them, there's a new number one. Nearly 1 in 5 people said it's addressing abortion laws. That was followed by more familiar topics, including education, roads, spending, and gun violence. When asked if they would describe themselves as pro-choice or pro-life, 58% of those surveyed said they were pro-choice, while 33% said they were pro-life. Now, those numbers and their 25% differential have been relatively consistent over the years. But when asked how they plan to vote on a ballot proposal in November that would establish abortion as a right here in Michigan, the margin between the two sides got even bigger. 67% of voters said they plan to vote yes, and just 24% said they'd vote no. That's a 43-point difference. The poll also spells some trouble for someone who's not on the ballot, President Joe Biden. When asked how he's doing on the job, only 30% gave him a positive rating. That's despite recent actions, including the Inflation Reduction Act, which he recently signed into law. Almost everyone else gave him a negative rating. Now, as you can see, there aren't many people who are undecided when asked this question. Those are his ratings professionally. Here's what people think of him personally, though. 38% of Michiganders say they have a favorable view of President Biden, compared to 53% who have an unfavorable view. And while those numbers are better than his job rating, they're still quite a bit underwater. Well, this poll was of 600 active and likely voters, and it had an even number of Republicans and Democrats, and talked to independents as well. And it was taken between August 18th and 23rd. Well, still ahead, we'll take a deeper dive into some of those poll results. Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic will break it all down for us when the Capitol Rundown returns. We've shown you the latest poll numbers about the Michigan elections this morning. Now, Jorma Duran and Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic are here for you to break down those numbers with a closer look.
Tim, we've gone over the latest poll numbers. They suggest Gretchen Whitmer not only has an 11-point lead over Tudor Dixon, but that she hit that magical 50% number. What do you make of those numbers?
Well, the fact that she has a lead over the challenger probably is not a huge surprise to anybody in this town. First of all, let's point out that Tudor Dixon basically at 39% is doing a good job of holding on to her Republican base, which of course she needed to win the primary election. But the last time I checked, governors are not elected at a primary election. They have to win at the general election. And since August the 2nd, it appears that Tudor Dixon has done very little to move the numbers off of her base of 39% to a higher number that would get her closer to the governor, who's at 50%.
Let's talk about the other races. 3/4 of the voters don't even know who Matt DePerno and Christina Karamo are, and yet they're not really too far behind against the incumbents. How do you explain that?
Well, it's a very simple explanation. What you're basically seeing there is that people don't know who they are, but they see the R after their name, and so they're voting the party, Republican. They could put Mickey Mouse in running for one of these offices, and if he had an R after his name, he'd get 39% of the vote, too. I'm not saying anything disparaging about the candidates. This is just a fact of life.
The difference, according to this poll, between people who call themselves pro-choice versus pro-life in Michigan is about 25%. But the difference between people who support the reproductive rights initiative that'll likely be on the November ballot is more than 40%. So how do you explain that? How is that possible?
Well, Michigan has predictably been a pro-choice state for a long period of time, for well over a decade. And of course, with the advent of the U.S. Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade, those numbers even solidified even more. And given a chance to vote on this ballot proposal, you've got well over 60% of the people saying they're going to vote yes. So it is a determining factor in this race. The Democrats have their fingers crossed that with this issue on the ballot, there will be more motivation for Democrats to vote than Republicans. That, you would expect the Democrats to say that. The Republicans are a little more sanguine about it. They said, look, our pro-life voters are going to be out there too because they're strong and they're passionate, and so it could be a wash. But the popular wisdom is that the voter turnout is going to be a little stronger because abortion is on the ballot, and that could then relate into other races. So you could see a trickle-down effect to the control of the Michigan House and Senate could also be in play here as a result of this one issue.
Thanks, guys. So when we come back, we'll talk to one of the candidates in one of the hottest congressional races in the country. It's a true toss-up happening right here in Michigan. That's when the Capitol Rundown returns. We just wrapped up a conversation with Tim. Now we're going to talk with Tom Barrett, that is. He's a current state senator who hopes to serve in Congress. He's battling Alyssa Slotkin to represent Mid-Michigan in one of the country's few toss-up districts, and it's a newly drawn district here in Michigan. Take a listen as he weighs in on that and the run-up to November.
We're out of the primary now and headed toward November. At this point, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I feel cautiously optimistic. And in my most recent election 4 years ago, Governor Whitmer, the Democrat candidate for governor, carried my district by 4 points, and I won by 10 points. So I do feel that I have a lot of crossover capability to reach independent voters. I think a lot of families, and particularly independent voters who have maybe school-age kids or need to get their kids back and forth to activities or are just trying to get by through daily life, see the rising cost of living that's really putting a huge damper on their ability to be successful. And these are a lot of things, a lot of factors with that are attributable to failed leadership in Washington, D.C. The country is on the wrong track. That's why I'm running for Congress. And I think a lot of independent voters will see that.
It really, from a local standpoint and nationally, I know it has a lot of attention, but locally, it is interesting because, here you are, you do have so much name recognition and you've built your reputation here in Lansing. And then you're going up against Alyssa Slotkin, who also has, a strong reputation. And then again, this is playing out in a kind of a newly drawn district. So how do you see that coming into play?
Is that this new district incorporates the area that I have represented now in the Michigan legislature for 8 years. And I didn't have to move anywhere to run in this district. My opponent, on the other hand, hasn't lived here more than a few months. I'm here, I'm raising a family. I moved to this district 4 days after I returned home from a deployment in Iraq. When my wife and I got married, she was already a resident of Eaton County. That's where we've been living since then. So I think I have a record of accomplishment. I think I have a record of one that relates to the voters of my district, the families and individuals who are struggling with the cost of living, with inflation at a 40-year high, with fuel prices still unaffordably high, with crime now on the rise in cities across America and most pronounced here in Lansing in the center of this congressional district, and with a border that's completely unsecured and a record number of illegal border crossings under this administration, fentanyl pouring into our communities, and now constitutes the leading cause of death of people my age in America is fentanyl overdose. So these are real challenges that are attributable to failed leadership in Washington. I'm offering people a different opportunity. The country is on the wrong track, and I'm going to do my best to win this race and do my part to restore America back to what we need to be for our next generation.
Well, still ahead here on the Capitol Rundown, we'll talk about how some legal issues are helping shape our political worlds here in Michigan and in Washington. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We want to catch you up on two big stories that are playing out not in political backrooms, but in a couple of courtrooms. We start with one of the bigger stories of the week. A jury convicted two men of plotting to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Adam Fox and Barry Croft face the rest of their lives in prison after that decision on Monday. A jury at their first trial back in April couldn't decide whether or not the pair was guilty, but a new jury took just a few hours to make that decision.
The verdict confirms that this plot was very serious, very dangerous, posed a threat not only to the governor personally and her family, but also to innocent bystanders and to basic social order.
You can protest. You can vote your elected officials out of office. However, what you cannot do is plan or commit acts of violence.
You know, unfortunately, in the legal process, there's always another day and there's always another rule and another avenue, and we will be pursuing all of those vigorously on behalf of our clients.
Two other suspects took plea deals in the kidnapping case, and two others were acquitted earlier this year. As for the governor, well, she responded to the jury's most recent decision with a call for civility.
Every one of us should be calling for accountability and should be doing our part to make sure that this kind of scary activity does not continue. We need good people to stand up, good people on both sides of the aisle and all walks of life, because we cannot let this become the normal in America. This is a great country. This is a beautiful state. We've got to make sure that we live our values.
And on Friday, we also learned more on the FBI investigation into former President Donald Trump. That's after the Justice Department released parts of the affidavits that prompted their search of his home in Florida. While much of the document was blacked out to protect the ongoing investigation, it did show that 14 or 15 boxes recovered from Mar-a-Lago earlier this year had classified material. It didn't say anything about the documents they found during the most recent search. Well, if you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we have just the thing for you. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email every week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right now. This will take you to the sign-up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletters. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We hope to see you back here again next weekend.